I am going to attempt to go through and lead you today. It is always intimidating to come into your peers and try to share with them, but I think that God has given me this stuff to help out with that today. So, Heavenly Father, so many times I have sang the song, "Open the eyes of my heart, Lord, and let me see you." You gave me and this other group of people here the opportunity to go to Israel, and you truly opened our hearts, and you truly let us see you and walk the ways that you walked and see the areas that you walked, Father, and for that I give you thanks. I ask today that you give us the Holy Spirit within us to be able to share this event with those who are in here and share it in a real way so that they can understand how this and how it showed us in color who and what you are. I give you thanks, Father, in your name we pray. Amen. If we can go to the En-Gedi slide, I'd appreciate it. There it is, En-Gedi. That is what's called an ibex. And it is a breed of goat, I guess you would say, that's in the En-Gedi area. And En-Gedi literally means the fall of the kid. We learned something interesting about these animals when we were there, because everything that you see in Israel seems to be rock until you get to this area of En-Gedi or any areas around the Jordan River. This particular area, I had called Pastor before we left and said, "Hey, it's my 30th wedding anniversary the week before. Can Pam and I renew our vows there?" Now, I was expecting to be able to do this in front of the falls, which we're going to show you a picture of in a minute. But we actually did it where people could sit around us, where we could be one, like he talked about today, and be the church as we did it. So we were able to renew our vows at our 30-year there. And she said yes again, believe it or not. But the interesting thing about these animals is that their hooves have muscles in them. And we were wondering, how do you get up all those rocks? How do you see the goats up there? They clasp those rocks with their hooves to bring themselves up, and they run them up like there's nothing there. It's unbelievable to watch. If we go to the next slide. And yeah, that's those two old people getting married again there. And then the fall behind you is the waterfall that they called the fall of the kid. Why is this area significant? What does it have to do with? This is the area when David was running from King Solomon that he was hiding out in, okay? This is the area not far from here that when Solomon went into a cave to do his business, David cut off the tail of his coat. And after Solomon left, he stood there holding the piece of his coat saying, "Hey, I could have taken your life, I chose not to." Okay? And the amazing part to me when we got there, and the reason I kind of chose this place, is I imagined David sitting at this fall. I imagined David being in these caves and writing these psalms, playing the music, and singing with his lyre, and it just echoing through those hills. If we go to the next slide, it's one that I added in here. It gives you kind of a better idea. On your right is the actual oasis. This oasis sits in the middle of desert, okay? There are rocks on either side. If you look to your left, you will see the little caves there. Just about any spot you go to in Israel has a mountain, rocks, and caves, okay? Whether they're man-made, whether they're washed by water, they're there. But then I look at these also and imagine David, how did he travel from Jerusalem, right? Yeah, Jerusalem, to this area. It is only a 35-mile distance for a bird. For the bus, it was 97 miles to get around the mountains and everything else. So En-Gedi is like I said, it's known best for serving the David's needs as David was out in the wilderness, as David was out there without anybody to protect him, I guess we would say. He was out there having to protect himself. So it was just amazing to me that he hid in these hills. God provided him with these fountains. God provided him with the food. He provided him with everything he needed in that area. Does anybody else in here have anything they can add to that?
Except it was sheer drops.
It was what?
Sheer drops.
Oh, okay. What she's saying is that where we were at was kind of, like I said, a plateau, but everything else on those mountains was straight down. Okay, we were in the valley looking up at everything else. So, and then basically to give you an idea where this is located, kind of up above the Dead Sea, or just right at the top end of the Dead Sea to the west. Okay, the next slide, if you could. I think we're going to go to Quorum next. I hope I don't get going too fast because I want Pastor to come in and do the rest of this, not force me to do it all. Okay, what you're looking at here on your left is a little thing on the canisters that the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in. And what you're looking at on your right is the cave where the first Dead Sea Scrolls were found. Now, this cave was actually excavated a little bit more, so those openings are wider than what they were, okay? But what had happened is there was a shepherd out there, and he was chasing his animals around, and one of them crawled into this cave. Again, how? Well, because they have those little things on their feet that do, no, I'm sorry. But anyway, so the animal crawled in that cave. He didn't want to go in the cave because there might be something else other than his animal in there. So he grabbed a rock, threw it in the cave to scare what else might be in there out, or his animal. And when he did, he heard pottery break. And at that point, he said, let's go see what this is. So he goes in, he finds the broken pottery with the scrolls. He takes them, and then this is the story of Duran. I couldn't find this anywhere else other than from Duran, who was our group leader. And he shows them to his father. And his father says, boy, you can't buy a pair of sandals with what you got there. And he was like, okay. Well, he kept them anyway. And then the short part of the story is he met this guy from... When? This, I think, was between 1946, is approximately when this was going on. Okay? When they discovered it. It was around 1946 when that happened. And then he met a guy who said, hey, I'll give you $100 for those. Well, this guy bought those scrolls, and as we would say, the rest is history. He researched them. They found out these scrolls were actually, how do I put this? There was on this hill where we were looking, from our viewpoint right here where we're standing taking the picture of that, there's an excavation there that's a banquet hall, okay? And this banquet hall is where these scholars would sit and be served. And I don't remember, there were some other things other than the banquet hall there on top of this where they were doing this excavation. It wasn't fully done yet. And you all are familiar with what a Pharisee is, right? The teachers of the law. And then you had the Sadducees, which were also teachers of the law. But these gentlemen who were up here were a group that was similar to the Sadducees and the Pharisees that were called the Essex. The difference in the Essex is they were more, I guess in terms for us, it'd be like they were more tough than the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church. They were more like the Wisconsin Synod, okay? They went by the rules, and they wanted to follow all the rules. Well, they continued investigating this area, and over the course of years, they found 11 more caves, and they found that had Dead Sea Scrolls in them. So they have found them written in Hebrew. I want to make sure I don't mess it up. They found them written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. And the funny part is that when this scholar who bought them thinking he knew what they might be, he took them to another scholar who spoke fluent Greek and Hebrew, and he said, well, I can't read these, they're written in Aramaic. So they had to go find somebody else to get them to decipher what they were and what they were about. Majority of them were written on papyrus paper. A lot of them were in pieces when they found them and different things, okay? And then this is also where we get the Apocrypha from, which the Apocrypha are the books of the Bible that were not included within it, or the writings that were not included within it. The Catholic Church recognizes them, other people do. And so the Apocrypha came from these, that they found these writings that were not known to exist up until that time, okay? Sorry, I'm reading my notes as I go along. Oh, I've read this and I kind of see it, but looking at those caves, you can kind of think of those as one of the first ever libraries. Okay? They think that they were hiding these scrolls in the caves in order to keep the Romans from coming in and destroying them and to keep the Philistines from coming in and destroying them. So they're believing that this is the reason for the scrolls to have been hidden within these caves. Okay? Anybody have any questions or anybody have anything else they want to add from our group? Hold on. Oh, by the way, I'm not going to mention names, but somebody like Joan told me if we don't use the microphone, we're in trouble.
They have made a complete museum that houses a bunch of these scrolls, and it's they protect them behind glass in climatized areas. I mean, they've got a huge, beautiful, huh? Right, they had taken them out because they were, I guess, saving them.
Protective of these scrolls, where they're kept at, we're going to show you this place in a couple of minutes here, but there's a place down by Jerusalem where they're kept at, where they have taken I don't know who did it, but there is a replication of Jerusalem, the original city, which you're going to see a couple of pictures of in a few minutes. And on that same compound, they have built a place to keep these photos. And I mean, they are very strict. You cannot take your phone out and take pictures. You cannot take a camera out and take pictures. You can't take anything else. Like, you can walk through here. It's a very dark, dim tunnel. And they didn't even have the scrolls in there when we went. But from what I understand is they have sections of the scrolls at different times, and so that they don't wear them out, I guess, with the light and everything else to let them go bad. Microphone, please.
Yeah, that room was humidity controlled, light controlled, so that no further damage could happen to those scrolls.
Yeah, because they were already in pieces anyway. Okay, next slide. Oh, question. Hold on. Oh, we have to do it because the ladies that are listening online want to hear them. Thank you, Jan.
How many years did the scrolls sit in the caves? Do they know?
They don't know. Some of the estimates are 300 BC is when they've been in there from, okay? I don't know if they have remember this when we're talking about Israel, okay? The only thing that we know for sure is the Dead Sea is where the Dead Sea is. Everything else is an educated guess. And the Sea of Galilee, we know, which is a lake, huh? So we know these things, but then everything else, like I said, is kind of an educated guess. We do have a few things we're going to see today where they have found writings to prove that these people were there and to lead us to believe that these places are the exact places that we think they are, like the Temple of Solomon and things like that. But they're estimating, I want to say 300 BC is when they were in there, and that could have been the time when the Philistines were coming in and tearing things up and destroying things, and that's the reason they wanted to hide them and keep them safe. And again, God works in mysterious ways.
Those pottery pieces were amazing. They had them in the museum where we could see them, and the fact that they could protect them for that many years, and the condition they got them out in was unbelievable. And they said they could even store food in those potteries containers.
One of the places we had been, they found when they were excavating a clay jar of peaches that were edible. Okay?
How did they know they were edible?
They ate them, I guess.
Again, educated guess. I don't think they ate them. But they were still preserved. Their peaches were still preserved. They were still in the juice, whole 9 yards. So the next slide is we're gonna keep on traveling up on Highway 90. Okay, which that sounds familiar to everybody here, doesn't it? But the Highway 90 goes in between these places that we're stopping at and the Dead Sea, and we're down below sea level, but we're traveling upwards towards Jericho at this point. So back up to right there. Okay, so this is an affirmation of baptism. I've already been baptized, okay, but I chose to make an affirmation of my baptism in the Jordan River. So I didn't want to insult God in any way, saying my baptism as a child wasn't good enough, and that's not, I want everybody to understand that. I just did this as an affirmation of my baptism. The interesting part about this is if you look across the river, you will see a red, white, and green flag. That is Jordan. Okay? That is another country on that side. I am on the Israel side. When we drove into this place, you see on either side of you barbed wire fences with signs that say, do not pass these fences, there are live landmines. Exciting, right? But I will tell you, I was safe the whole time I was there. I'm going to keep repeating that. I was safe the whole time I was there. We knew this going in. This area was fought over up until I think about 2004. In 1994, a treaty was signed. And then in 2004, it was set up to where we could go visit that site. Jordan could come down to that site. And with that treaty being signed, we can now go visit the Jordan River, which is just south of Jericho, which is the area that they believed that Jesus was baptized in. But we chose that as an area. Something neat that happened when we were there. Well, not neat. Let me do one thing. So on this side, you have armed Israeli guards, and on this side, you have the armed Jordanian guards. Okay, they're very quiet. They just sit there and they watch, and people are doing what they do. There is a barbed wire going through the middle of the river at that point. Okay, and the steps are very slippery, so you might get baptized even if you don't want to when you walk down those steps. But the most beautiful thing happened to me is after a few of us went down and we were reaffirmed our baptism, it was almost as if it was a movie cue. We were walking up and 3 white doves flew over top of us and landed right above those guards. So it was just a symbol of peace, saying, God is with you. And when I prayed, I said, open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Going to Israel truly opens you up to understand it's real. I mean, I already know it's real, but it opens you up to understand this is real. These people walked here. These things happen, and you begin to get an understanding of, like, for example, the Promised Land. They kept saying, we're going to go to the Promised Land, and in my mind, when we were heading to Jordan, I'm seeing this desolate desert out there, all right? And it may as well have been Mars. We had to go around this mountain ridge to get around to Jordan, and there was just nothing. And prior to seeing that, I always wondered, he gave them manna. He gave water from a rock. Why are they complaining? I know why now. That place is horrible, okay? That place is just scary just walking past it. I mean, there's nothing there. Again, little simple things like that when you help you to understand why these people were grumbling. I'd have been grumbling too, okay? Yeah, there was no place to bathe at all. So anyway, so that's the Jordan, and that pretty much was all that happened right there was the baptisms of Jesus, and it was believed to be that spot where he was at. And I think next from there, this was one of our busiest days. We had a lot of places. What day are we on? We're on day 7 here, right? I think. Yeah, so we had a lot of places on that day. From there, we headed up to Jericho, and I think this one right here shows you a map. I added this because one of the biggest questions I get from everybody who said, were you scared? No, I wasn't. Did you feel unsafe? No, I didn't. Mainly because the guy that we were with is ex-Israeli army, which most everybody there is, but he was also in special forces, and he knew everybody, and he knew everything that was going on. This was the first time I had a little bit of, what is this? Because we were going from Jordan, and then we were curving back up towards the west at the end of the Dead Sea to go to Jericho. And there was this little guard check with Israelis on one side and the Jordanian on the other, the Palestinian guard on the other. But what I learned that I hadn't understood before, I always thought of West Bank as just the Gaza Strip, down on the water and super dangerous zone. Well, the way the Gaza Strip, back up one more if you would, is divided. You have Area A, okay, is your blue or your darker pink area. Area A is policed by the Palestinians, okay? Then you have Area B, which they have administrative control, but they share it with Israelis, and Israelis are allowed to come in that area and live, okay? And then you have the sea area, which is administered by Israelis, and it's occupied by Israelis and by Palestinians. If you see that, there is no rhyme or reason to what area is what. So you can real easily be traveling, and then all of a sudden you're leaving Israel and going into what they call West Bank, okay? If you do the next slide now, you'll see how the West Bank fits into Israel, just kind of right in the middle of it. Okay, then you have these different districts in there. And you can also see that Jerusalem was annexed out of the West Bank. So it's now part of Israel. And then you can see down there, Gaza Strip. Yeah, we stayed away from there. We didn't go near that area at all.
Overlook the West Bank. We did go. Hello?
Jonathan, can you turn the microphone up?
We did go overlook the West Bank, and while we were up there, I guess you're coming to
No,
this?
that's a different spot.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, that's a different, little bit different spot. We'll get to that one in just a minute. Okay. The next place we're going to go to on our, as I said, we're heading towards Jericho. You see that slide? This is the first place I went and said, yeah, that's kind of what I expected. What happened to Jericho? They marched around the walls until the walls fell down. It's still like that. They have also excavated in this area. There's several areas within there. This is thought to be the oldest city in the world. Okay? But it is the one where, you know, the lady had them come up to the room, then they marched around and she gave them all the intel. It fell down. This is the first city that they destroyed once they were given the country. Again, this city thrived because in that area they have several springs that come out of the rocks. So they had plenty of water. It was known as the city of the palms. It's referred to that in some of the biblical verses. I don't know which ones there were in there. But it's known as the city of the palms because they actually had trees in there. Trees are very rare in Israel, but this particular city had that. And then there is a valley, kind of where we're right there, there's a valley off to the west that goes in between two mountains, and that was the travel path that would take you back up to Jerusalem from there. So they did have a pathway along the Jordan River that would take them back and forth through that area.
When we looked down on
Hold on.
Jericho,
Go ahead.
when we looked down on Jericho, I was asking, where is it? Because that dirt there, that pile of dirt that's maybe, I don't know, 10 acres, was the total of Jericho at the time.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure a lot more has happened to it as far as turning to rubble since that point in time. But, yeah, it was, like I said, it was the only place I walked up to and said, yep, that's what I was looking for. So, okay, so from there then we turned and we went back towards the Jerusalem area in a place called Beth Shean. Beth Shean has biblical background to it, but it also has a lot of engineering background to it. I'm going to start with the engineering background. If you look at that photo, you see those pillars on that road. That was the main road. If you look, the road kind of comes up like this, and you see rocks in the center of that road, kind of like a center line, right? That's the sewage system. They had those rocks put over top of the sewage drains that were piped out of the city so that if it got clogged up, they could lift the rocks and unstop it and put the rocks back down. Now, this city, when our tour guide was there in 1984, you can't see it in this photo, but off to your right of here is a huge Colosseum. The only thing visible of this city in 1984 was the top portion of that Colosseum. None of this was seen. Somebody asked to build on the property, and as they do in Israel, they went through, they did their, I don't know what they call it. What is it called?
It's an archaeological survey.
It's an archaeological survey, okay, that looks underground to see what you got. And they got a hard no. You're not digging. You're not building here. We got to dig this one up. Okay.
That happens all the time.
Yeah. You know, some of you heard it last week. Some of them you didn't. But it's very common for them to either say build or don't build, or build, but leave me room to get underneath there so I can go excavate it later and see what it is. I mean, everything in there is an archaeological find, it seems. This is where they believe that King Saul and his sons were hung when they were executed for the things that they had done by the Philistine army. Okay? They had things in here like they had a steam bath. They had these pillars that came up where they would heat water and run it underneath those pillars that had stone on top of them to make a steam room so that the king could have a place to go have a steam bath. They had toilets where you would take and do what you do. Then they had guys who would come in and dump the water into them. They had water piped into the city. They actually had on your left-hand side, those were the little shops. And when you walk through there, you can look down on the floor and you can see the mosaics on each one of the shops. And the shop that was just past that little tent right there with those mosaics indicated that it was for the oldest profession known. And it had a back door to get out and a back door to get in, not just a front door. So those were... To the bathhouse, I'm sorry, yeah. So it had a back door that went straight to the bathhouse so that you could go get clean after partaking in that business. Sorry, I'm pausing here because I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Microphone, please.
One where y'all stood on they had the games in the mosaics, and you stood on that was one of their games, was to stand, two men would stand there and try to push the other or something?
Yeah, there was a game where on these mosaics they had in there, there were several different games, and they were rather gruesome games, but they would try to harm each other. If they fell off of their tile, they pretty much lost their life type thing. And these were just standard games that they would play out on the street there. There was something else, Mark, let's see. Oh, this is also where they believe that Jesus healed the deaf man. Okay, it was in this area, so they mentioned that area within there. Healed the deaf man. Sorry, I'll get...
This road is also an example of the type of road Jesus would have walked with his cross. It's not the road he walked with his cross, but it's the way it's made. It was a kind of road, and it kind of comes to a point so that all the bad things go to the gutter and get washed away. But that's the kind of road he would have walked on with his cross.
Okay. Any other questions? I hope I'm not moving too fast. All right, next place, they're kind of out of order. This isn't really the next place we went to, but we went to Caesarea of Philippi. Oh, no, he's on Magdala? Okay, I got different notes on that. Magdala. This was a hotel that we went to, and it's on the southeast side of the Sea of Galilee. And again, they were getting ready to build this hotel. And when they did their little archaeological thing, they deemed the part where the hotel is built that we can dig this later, or it's not something we need to look at. But then on the one side of the hotel, they found a temple right on the edge of the Sea of Galilee, right down the road from where Jesus lived. And if you look at the center of that picture within that square is where they would have sat around and heard the rabbi speak. And if you look at that square piece of stone right there, we talked last week about the horns of the stone. They're worn, but that is a small altar in there that would have been your altar for your sacrifices within that temple. Now, they believe that this was the home synagogue of Mary of Magdala. Okay, because that is, of course, we're in Magdala. Now, ladies, y'all have to help me on this, and forgive me, but we took a picture of all of y'all together there. Can one of y'all tell the story of why we did that? What was the significance of all the ladies? They don't remember. My wife didn't either. There was something about the ladies had been in this synagogue and were allowed to worship there, I thought, but I can't remember. Hopefully we can ask Pastor. Go ahead.
Didn't they say we all had to get together because there was a place that they let the ladies go in that they normally didn't?
Right, I think this was the first temple that they allowed the ladies to come in
I think you're right.
and worship. And so the next picture you will see is of all the ladies in front of the temple. We need to get Pastor to confirm that one. There we go. Yeah, because it was raining that day, so they were underneath there, and we're over here, and Pastor's over there talking. We're trying to hear him between the rain that's coming down between us. So, but that was just a real neat place. They built a church there, and he didn't put a picture of it up, but there's a most unique picture of the Mother Mary there where she's holding her baby in her tummy like this on the statue. Just a beautiful, beautiful statue. And then we're all going to get together and purchase this next altar that we took a picture of, because this is their altar within the church. If we can go to that next slide. Oh, no. Back up. Was it not there? I thought we had it on there. Go back one more. Is there a picture of a boat-looking thing on there, Jonathan? Anyway, they have this big fishing vessel in the church as their altar. No, that's not it. Back up one more for me, if you would. That's the synagogue there. It's not on there? Okay. Then we'll go ahead and go forward. So we got up from there in the morning, and we drove to Caesarea Philippi, which was originally known as just Caesarea, but one of the people added the Philippi to discern it from another Caesarea, so it's now Caesarea Philippi. First of all, bus drivers in Israel are amazing. They drive those buses like they're a mini fit car. They can get them anywhere. We went around this windy road that was maybe this wide and didn't hit anybody else, pulled in a parking spot with no places, and one bus driver etches around him, and he etches around him to back into a space for us to park. Okay? Then they park in parking garages. It was just unbelievable. These guys are fantastic. So if you ever get an Israeli driver, he's a great bus driver. What you're looking at here is called the gates of hell. Caesarea is the area where Jesus was sitting with Paul, right? Yeah, Paul. And they were asking, who am I? And Jesus said, well, Peter, who do you say that I am? And he told them, you are the Lord. You are Christ the Lord. Right now, my hair's standing up on my arms because it gives me chills. Here's why. That's called the gates of hell. The next one that you see, this is what they would do with that gates of hell. You see these rocks right here? They would go to the top of that rock, all right? The people who were there, not the Christians, but the people who were there, and they would sacrifice people off of there into what they call the gates of hell when you read about it. If you go to the next slide, when they dropped them off of the top up there, down into that pit, if blood came out of the spring, it was a good sacrifice. If they didn't see the blood, we need another one. And they would continue until that happened. Okay? And then go to the next slide, if you would. If you look to the one, this is how surreal this is. You see the beauty on the left. Okay? This is where I imagine Jesus sitting and talking to the disciples when he was in Philippi. All right? But then just above that beautiful area, which, by the way, this is where a spring is just flowing out of the mountain right there. What you see is the rocks behind it, and you step down about, 20 feet, 30 feet, and then this water is just coming out of the mountains, okay? And it feeds into the Jordan. It's one of the rivers that feeds into the Jordan. But to think of how beautiful that area was and how peaceful it was, and this is the first thing we saw when we got off the bus and we went in there, we just see this peaceful area. But then we walk up and we see this, and you see those indentations in the side of the mountain there. Those are where they would sacrifice or put their different gods up to worship them. So when you read about the high place in the Bible, this is the high place that they're talking about where they worshiped the false gods and did all these type of things. So for Peter to answer, you are Christ the Lord in this area, was not a good thing for him. That shows his faith. That shows how true he was to God. Because could you imagine if you're sitting in an area that is prevalent to this type of worship, and you're saying Jesus is Lord?
Well, it was a total Roman town.
Microphone, please.
Total Roman town, and if you professed that you believed in Jesus, they'd kill you. So that was the significance of who do you say I am? And by answering that question, you are the Lord, he put his life on the line.
So again, when we talk about open the eyes of my heart, Lord, and you're standing there, it gives you realization of what these disciples were doing. It gives you realization of how committed they were, okay? When you see the areas that they traveled, how far they humped it on their feet as far as getting from point A to point B. We were in a bus, and it was a scary trip in some parts. Not because of the people, but because of the way that bus had to go up these hills and such. The other bald guys here, you want to come up here and... All right. But this might be one of your second to last classes. Where are you? I'm in Caesarea Philippi. And then, okay, we have a question for you. When we took the picture of the ladies... Of the ladies at Magdala, at the temple in Magdala. It wasn't a temple. The synagogue. What was the significance of taking the photo of the ladies? And you have to use the microphone. I'm going to give you this one too.
Because Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene is from Magdala. And so this would be, that's why he put the women over there, because this is where Jesus, I think, delivered her and so forth. So the reason Magdala was not her last name. It was just like Jesus of Nazareth, Mary of Magdala, or Mary the Magdalene is why. So that's the synagogue, and you can kind of see the shape of the way the synagogues were. Synagogues were teaching places. Not like we think of where you get together and you do word and sacrament or anything like that. They were places that you taught, because really the only place of worship in Judaism would have been the temple, okay? And so the synagogues were places where they taught the word. Like even today, the Jewish people will go to a synagogue and learn Hebrew as part of their life. And so that's what the Magdala. What else? What's next on the list? Capernaum? Okay, now Capernaum. You know, you hear that this is the town of Jesus, and that's what they say when you get there. It's I didn't put it up there because it's funny. They have they have little black colored pillars that are all over the place, and they got them out here doing traffic. But those were taken from, those are the ones that are from the first century, not the synagogue itself that we saw. And there was one out there that said, wear shoes or something like that. And I thought, okay, this is just really strange. But Capernaum, Jesus most likely moved there between 26 and 30 years old. He was living there already. So you need to understand, when Jesus calls his disciples, this is not the first time they've met him. He's been part of their lives. These are small towns, and everybody knows each other. So that's something for you to think about. The other thing I wanted to share with you is that the whole thing. I'm a firm believer, in my mind, it's just in my mind only, that the disciples were teenagers, and they weren't grown up bearded men like you think. The only one that would have been over 21, I believe, would have been Peter. And the reason I believe that is because at 12 or 13 is when your education ended, and only if you got picked up by a rabbi did you continue your education. And the fact that Peter and James and John and these guys are all fishing means they didn't get picked by a rabbi. They were the ones the rabbis didn't want. So Jesus picks the least likely guys, okay? Yeah, and the other thing that I would say to you is that so for Jesus to take the disciples to Caesarea Philippi, which was a pagan area, like you were talking about, probably upset their mothers. When if you remember when he crosses the Sea of Galilee and they meet the demoniac, that's over in the Decapolis. Yours has already been to Bet
We haven't
Shean.
been there yet.
Oh, you haven't?
No, we're going.
Okay. Anyway, we'll talk about that when we get there. But the other reason is that you'll never notice when it comes to paying taxes, Jesus gets a fish and takes out a coin for his taxes and for Peter's. But he doesn't get anything for anybody else to pay their taxes. Well, you had to be 21 to pay taxes.
We did go to Bet Shean, and I did leave out the Gentiles.
That Bet Shean is that Greek-looking ruined city that was ruined.
With
You
the
saw
sewer
that?
in the middle?
Yeah. Bet Shean is where Saul and Jonathan's heads were hung on pole, and then but it's part in Jesus' day. It was part of the Decapolis, the 10 cities, which was a Gentile area, and one of those cities is where Jesus went, and the demoniac was there, and he healed the demoniac. Most likely, the disciples never got out of the boat because Mama would have told them, "Don't you go over into that neighborhood." Go ahead.
That also makes it, saying that makes it make a lot more sense when you think about how we hear about James and John's mother.
Yeah.
Well, the next slide's going to show you something on that too, right there.
Okay, well, let's hold on that. James and John's, most likely, when Jesus calls John, he's probably 11 or 12 years old. It's not simply at the cross. Now, remember, with 13, 14, they were of age to work. They were men in that culture. But cross says to behold your mother, behold your son. He's also telling Mary to take care of John. It's not just John to take care of Mary. He's looking out for the youngest one. Okay, go ahead. You asked. He wasn't among the disciples, so we don't really know, but he's Barnabas's nephew, and he's the author of one of the Gospels. And one of the things that's unique about Mark is we believe in Mark's Gospel that Mark is the one who ran away naked. They grabbed his linen cloth. The word for what he was wearing is the same word that gets used in Mark for the burial cloths of Jesus. So so we believe that that the whole point in Mark is saying Jesus wore my sinful garment for me. That Mark is a really unspoken thing, and you don't know that. I got that pointed out to me by my son Stephen. What was the question about the gates of hell? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The thing about what he says, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father is in heaven. And he says, and I tell you, upon this rock, and they called that mountain the rock of God, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. So Jesus is doing great teaching. He's just using the imagery right around him when he does that. Go ahead. Well, the guy wants to get into the boat and go back with Jesus, and Jesus says, "No, you go tell everybody what God's done for you," and he leaves. That's the only thing Jesus does over there is heal one of the men who was a bishop who eventually was at the Council of Nicaea. So out of this one man comes, faith of a lot of other people. Yeah. I don't know if it's in Greek, but it's, I think, creed, yeah, the creed.
Interesting thing about that is whenever you saw Jesus don't tell anybody, he was in a Jewish area. Whenever you heard him say, go tell everyone what you have seen, he was typically in a Gentile area, okay? Because he knew the Jews would get back to the rabbis, and his time wasn't time yet. But when he told the Gentiles, they're just going to go tell each other and start spreading the word.
Yeah. Okay, what's the next one? Capernaum.
Which would make sense with him being 12 or 13.
They found, now, they call this the home of Peter. And it's because they found evidence that this is a first century, the stuff is the right color, so it's a first century home. But the reason they believe they call it the house of Peter is tradition, and because they found evidence of fishing equipment, that a fisherman lived in this house, okay? The reason it looks so odd is the Roman Catholic Church has built a huge Catholic church over the top of it. We didn't go in, but if you go in, it's got a glass floor, and you can look down into the house of Peter. Go ahead. Next slide. There's a synagogue. Now this is not the first century synagogue. It's built right on top of it. And they know that because the first century synagogue, you can see the foundation of it because it's a dark stone. But it's a lot like what it would have looked like. Anytime you go into the ruins of a synagogue in Galilee, of a first century synagogue, then you can know beyond a doubt that Jesus was there, because the scriptures say he taught in all the synagogues of Galilee. So you go to a first century synagogue in Galilee, and Jesus was there at one time in this very place.
Isn't this the one that was thought that the centurion that he served or that he healed led to get that built?
Yeah, I think the centurion helped build it. I think probably the one in Jesus' day. I don't know if it was this one or not. I don't know. Next. We don't need to look at that fat man with the hat. That was me.
That's a baptismal font that they had. So some people got together and hauled that up here to this area, and that was where they would baptize multiples when they came in with that baptismal font.
The reason this area, I've been to this area. This was a different part of this that I have never been to before. This is believed to be the site of the feeding of the 5,000. Is the breaking, as well. But the other thing that you need to know is if we had gone to the other side, down by the water, the Sea of Galilee, it's also believed to be the site of Jesus' last resurrection appearance.
Island, or that side, right there.
Well, it'd be down there at the bottom in the Sea of Galilee. And we'll talk about this, yeah, but so down there, when the disciples are out fishing in John 21, and Jesus is on the shore, and Peter, I always think it's so strange, Peter threw his clothes on and then jumped into the water. I don't know if you ever read that, but it's what it says. And because he got so excited to go to shore and see Jesus, and Jesus is already there. That's the funny thing about that story. They catch like 153 fish, and the scriptures name how many fish there were after Jesus tells them to put the stuff on the other side. But when they get there, he's already cooking dinner. He already had fish as well. So go back a second. I don't remember what that is. Okay. Oh, I know what that is. That's the Church of the Beatitudes. That's the Church of the Beatitudes. This is on the mount, and it's a little mount that's looking down towards the Sea of Galilee. It is the site where they believe Jesus spoke the Sermon on the Mount. And people would have been gathered around him there, and the disciples. And so there's a church, Catholic monastery, I think there, something like that. Isn't it a church there?
Down to the right of that, what you're looking at, those big cloths, that's a banana farm. Where they cover the banana leaves and they're growing them, the fruit in there. But off to the right down below, there's actually an old Roman road that you could see that still portions of it exist that would come up to that area.
Any questions? We're at the end of the time today, because I do have to do second service. We'll get this done before I retire.
30 next week, remember?
No, not next week.
No, the week after, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, all right.
I'm getting ahead of myself.
He's trying to get me out the door quicker.
No, I'm trying to get everybody to early service to hear the testimonies because they're going to be beautiful next week. I'm looking forward to them.
All right, can we bow our heads in prayer? Father, I just thank you for the Tommy and taking the time to help lead this today, and we ask your continued blessing on our teaching and learning. Go with us now as we go home or as we go into the next service. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.